The wind howled against the rusted frame of the small mobile home. Inside, Daniel Hayes, 36, wrapped his jacket tighter around his little girl as thunder cracked above them. The generator had gone out again, and the fridge was empty, except for a half loaf of bread, 2 eggs, and a wilting tomato. That would be dinner. Daniel wasn't poor by choice. He used to work as a chef in a fancy restaurant downtown, back before his wife passed away and his world crumbled. Now he picked up odd jobs, painting, fixing things, anything to keep them afloat. But this week had been rough. Work dried up, rent was overdue, and 7-year-old Emily's asthma medication was almost out. He fried the last 2 eggs on a dented skillet, layered them between toasted bread with thin tomato slices, and placed the sandwich carefully on a cracked plate. "Here, Em," he whispered, brushing damp hair from her forehead. But Emily shook her head. "You eat, Daddy. I'm not hungry." He smiled, that tired kind of smile only parents know. "We'll share." But just as he sliced the sandwich, headlights washed over the trailer. A car door slammed, then knocking. He hesitated. Who'd be out in this storm? At the door stood a woman, soaked through. Her clothes clung to her like wet paper, her lips were blue and her hands trembled. "Car. Died," she gasped. "Phone's dead too. Please, do you have any food? Anything warm?" Daniel looked past her to a sleek black sedan stalled at the edge of the muddy road, then down to the only food they had left. He didn't hesitate. "Come in," he said, handing her the plate. She blinked, stunned. "No, I can't. That's not." "It's yours," he said gently. "You look like you need it more." Her hands shook as she took it, eyes wide with disbelief. Emily peeked out from behind the couch, clutching her inhaler. The woman smiled at her softly and sat down, steam rising from the sandwich as the scent filled the room. Daniel made her tea with the last tea bag. They had no sugar or milk, but she sipped it like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. As she warmed her hands on the mug, she looked around. No photos on the walls. A faded teddy bear beside a sagging mattress. She seemed to notice the smallness of everything. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. She hesitated. "Maya. Just Maya." He nodded. Didn't ask more. They didn't talk much that night. He gave her a dry blanket, let her sleep on the couch, and stayed up listening to the wind batter the trailer. He never asked who she was, or why a woman in a designer coat had been driving alone through a storm on a road no one used anymore. By morning, she was gone, left behind a note, folded neatly. "Thank you for seeing me, for feeding me. I won't forget it." Daniel smiled and shook his head. Life was strange. He didn't know he'd see her again, and he didn't know she'd walk back into their lives holding the power to save the person he loved most. 2 weeks passed, and Maya became a memory. Just another passerby Daniel helped along the road, as he always did. That's who he was. Even with nothing, he gave what little he had. But things were getting worse. Emily's breathing had grown more shallow. Her old inhaler was almost empty, and Daniel couldn't afford a refill without skipping rent. He'd already borrowed from every friend, pawned every tool, and the restaurant where he once worked said they were cutting hours, not hiring. That morning, Emily coughed so hard her lips turned blue. He rushed her to the local clinic, a crumbling building that still ran on paperwork and old promises. The nurse behind the desk gave him a look he recognized. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. Without insurance and with your balance." "She's just a kid," he snapped, desperation cracking in his voice. "I'll pay it. Please just let her see a doctor." The nurse hesitated, then pointed him toward a waiting room. Daniel clutched Emily to his chest and sat on the cold plastic chair, heart racing. He stared at the clock, praying. Then, a voice behind him. "Daniel Hayes?" He turned. Maya. But she looked different now. Hair tied up, crisp white coat, clipboard in hand. She wore no makeup, but there was a confidence in her walk, a certainty in her voice. "Maya?" he asked, stunned. She nodded, smiling gently. "Dr. Maya Bennett, pediatric thoracic specialist. I'm on sabbatical here, helping the clinic." Daniel stood, lost for words. "You didn't tell me," he murmured. "You didn't ask," she said. Maya knelt beside Emily, her tone switching instantly to professional warmth. "Hi, sweetheart. I remember you. Let's get you breathing better, okay?" She guided them gently to an exam room. For the next 30 minutes, she worked with a kind of precision that only came from years of experience. She adjusted Emily's medication, gave her a nebulizer treatment, and taught Daniel breathing techniques he could do at home. When Emily finally relaxed, asleep with steady breaths, Maya turned to Daniel. "She has chronic asthma," she said softly, "but manageable, with the right care." Daniel shook his head. "I can't afford the right care." "You already paid," she whispered. "You gave me your only meal. I don't forget things like that." She stood and placed a folder in his hands. Inside, new prescriptions, inhaler vouchers, and a prepaid follow-up schedule. "I don't want charity," Daniel said, eyes wet. "It's not," Maya replied. "It's gratitude." He didn't know what to say. But that night, as Emily slept peacefully, Daniel stepped outside under the stars. The storm had passed, and for the first time in months, so had the fear. He didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a one-time gesture. Maya's reappearance was about to become something much deeper. Not just medicine, not just gratitude, but a future. Maya hadn't planned on staying in the city this long. She came to this rundown clinic on a 3-week sabbatical, to escape the suffocating pressure of her hospital's board, the headlines that called her a miracle surgeon, and the silence of a house too big for one. But Daniel and Emily changed that. She found herself drawn back, day after day, sometimes under the excuse of checking Emily's progress, sometimes just to see the way Daniel lit up when Emily laughed again. Daniel, too, found his days shifting. With Maya's help, Emily was getting better. She started drawing again, her favorite pink crayons always nearby. Daniel, in turn, took small jobs wherever he could, cleaning gutters, fixing fences, helping neighbors in ways that echoed his quiet strength. Still, he never stopped wondering why Maya had helped him, or what she was hiding behind those calm eyes. One chilly morning, after Emily's follow-up appointment, Daniel offered to walk Maya back to her car. The streets were still slick from a late-night drizzle, and the neighborhood buzzed with city sounds, sirens in the distance, pigeons scattering, lives overlapping. Maya hesitated at the car door. "You know," she said, "you never asked what I was running from that night." Daniel looked at her. "I figured if you wanted to talk, you would." She smiled faintly. "Most people are curious." "I'm not most people," he said, "but I'm here." Maya exhaled. "I had a patient, a child," she said. "I fought to save her, but the hospital, they were focused on rules, liability. She died waiting for approval." She looked down, blinking hard. "I told the press. I thought it would make things better. It didn't." "You lost your career." "Number just my faith in it." Daniel nodded, quietly taking that in. "You did everything you could," he said. Maya looked at him then. Not as a doctor, not as a stranger, but as a man who understood grief that doesn't have answers. The kind that just sits with you. They stood in silence as the wind picked up. Leaves spiraled past their feet. Then a sudden voice broke through. "Daddy!" Emily came running, cheeks flushed, holding something in her hand. A folded drawing. "I made this for Dr. Maya." Maya unfolded the paper. It showed the three of them. Daniel holding a toolbox, Maya in a doctor's coat, Emily in between them, smiling under a sun drawn with yellow crayon rays. Maya's breath caught. Daniel watched her, a quiet hope blooming behind his eyes. Sometimes healing didn't begin in hospitals or grand gestures. Sometimes it started with pink crayon hearts and a child's belief that family didn't need to follow bloodlines. Maya hadn't planned on staying for dinner, but Emily's excited tug on her sleeve and Daniel's quiet nod of welcome made it impossible to say no. Inside the modest apartment, warmth radiated not from space heaters, but from the scent of something simmering on the stove and the laughter that clung to the walls. Daniel's home was small: 2 worn couches, a cluttered coffee table covered in coloring books and mechanics manuals, but it felt more alive than her entire penthouse suite ever had. Dinner was simple: mac and cheese, canned green beans, and toast, but they ate it like it was a holiday meal. Emily told silly stories between bites, Daniel listened with patient amusement, and Maya just watched, studied, felt. Halfway through the meal, Emily disappeared into her room and returned with a crumpled shoebox. "This is our treasure box," she said, proudly lifting the lid. Inside were old ticket stubs, faded photos, a broken toy wrench. At the bottom lay a note, scribbled in uneven handwriting. "We may not have much, but we have each other." Signed, Mom. Maya's hand stilled above her plate. Daniel noticed and for the first time spoke about her. Her name was Rachel. She passed 4 years ago. Complications after surgery. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. The weight in his voice filled in the blanks. "She sounds like someone who loved deeply," Maya said quietly. "She did. Still does, somehow," he replied. They were quiet after that, the air thick with things neither of them had expected to share. Later that evening, as Emily slept curled up on the couch beside her box of treasures, Maya helped Daniel wash dishes. "I'm sorry," he said out of nowhere, "for earlier, about your patient. It must have been hell." Maya dried a plate, staring at its chipped edge. "It still is." Daniel leaned back against the counter. "You ever think about going back to medicine?" "Every day." "Then why don't you?" Maya looked at him, truly looked. "Because the system I trusted let me down. I don't know if I can trust myself anymore." Daniel didn't try to fix her. He didn't offer a solution. He just stood beside her, hands wet, a quiet presence that didn't press, but didn't walk away either. And somehow, that was more healing than anything she'd received in months. That night, as Maya stepped outside into the chilled air, Daniel handed her an umbrella she'd left by the door. "You're welcome here anytime," he said. She nodded, but didn't speak. Because something inside her had shifted, and for the first time in a long time she wasn't sure where she belonged more, the hospital that made her or the home that had just fed her soul. The storm had passed, but its memory clung to the streets. Puddles rippling under the morning breeze, branches strewn like brittle bones, and the cold dampness that crept through coats and hearts alike. Inside the apartment, Daniel was running late for work, juggling Emily's backpack, his rusted toolbox, and a lunch bag he barely remembered packing. Emily, wrapped in her pink coat and dragging her favorite blue bear, was quiet. Too quiet. By the time they reached the corner bus stop, her steps had slowed. She looked pale, her lips dry. Daniel crouched beside her, concern sharpening his features. "You okay, Peanut?" She shook her head weakly, and then, without warning, Emily collapsed in his arms. Panic burst through Daniel like a gunshot. He screamed her name, caught her before she hit the pavement, and looked around helplessly. People were passing, but no one stopped. He checked her pulse, tried to wake her. Nothing. Her breathing was shallow. Too shallow. Then a voice, steady, sharp, and commanding. "Daniel." He turned and saw Maya running toward them, hair wind-blown, stethoscope around her neck. She didn't hesitate. Dropped to her knees, pulled out her phone with one hand, checked Emily's vitals with the other. "Call 911, she snapped. "Tell them she's 7, unconscious, likely hypoglycemic shock." Daniel obeyed, hands trembling. Maya pulled a small glucose gel from her coat pocket, one she carried from habit, from loss, from guilt, and gently squeezed it into Emily's mouth. "Come on, baby girl, stay with me," she whispered. Minutes felt like hours. But then, Emily stirred. Her tiny eyelids fluttered. She groaned softly, whispering, "Daddy?" Daniel sobbed, clutching her hand. "I'm here. I'm right here." By the time the ambulance arrived, Maya had stabilized Emily's vitals, kept her breathing steady, and stayed at her side like she was her own. At the hospital, doctors confirmed Maya's quick thinking had saved Emily's life. If they had waited even 5 more minutes, things could have turned out very differently. Daniel stood in the sterile hallway staring at the closed ICU doors, shaking with the aftermath. Maya approached quietly. "She's going to be okay," she said gently. He turned to her, eyes glassy. You saved her." "You saved me first," she replied. Their eyes locked. And something passed between them, beyond gratitude, beyond coincidence, a bond built in fire, in sacrifice, in shared silence. Later, when Emily woke up and reached for both of them with sleepy arms, Maya didn't hesitate. She held that small hand like it meant everything. And maybe it did. The days that followed blurred between sterile hospital corridors and whispered prayers. Daniel barely left Emily's side, sleeping upright in the visitor's chair, his hand wrapped protectively around hers. Maya returned every day without fail, sometimes in her white coat, sometimes in jeans and a hoodie, but always with warmth in her voice and quiet strength in her eyes. She brought books for Emily, warm meals for Daniel, and stories about the stars for both of them. Stories that made the machines and tubes fade away for a moment. Emily would light up when she walked in. One afternoon, while Emily napped peacefully and sunlight bathed the room in a soft golden glow, Daniel turned to Maya, his voice low. "Why did you really stop that night, in the storm?" Maya looked out the window, then back at him. "Because I was lost." She told him about the surgery that went wrong, the lawsuit that wasn't her fault, the patient she couldn't save, the way she'd packed up her life in the city and started driving with no destination, just an ache to disappear. "I had all the money, the reputation, but no peace," she whispered, "until your little girl smiled at me from that drawing on the fridge, until you gave me your last meal without even knowing my name." Daniel sat quietly, taking it in. "I didn't do much," he said. "You did everything," she replied. When Emily was discharged, the nurses hugged her goodbye like she was family. Daniel walked out with his daughter in one hand, and Maya walking just a step behind, holding the other. In the weeks that followed, something quiet and beautiful unfolded. Not fireworks, not dramatic declarations, just slow Sunday breakfasts, laughter over board games, and 3 people slowly learning how to become something more than they were. Daniel got a new job, part-time maintenance at the same hospital. Maya helped tutor Emily in science, and on the anniversary of the stormy night that started it all, they visited the small diner where it began. Daniel handed Maya a paper bag. She opened it and laughed. It was a warm sandwich, the same kind he gave her that night, except now it had a note tucked inside. It read, "This time, I hope you stay for dessert." She looked up, and Daniel, nervous, hopeful, reached across the table and took her hand. In the end, the stranger he fed was the miracle they all needed. And somehow, through a sandwich, a storm, and a second chance, they had become a family.